It's the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccer Files Canada. Welcome to Series 25, looking at the players of Euro 2024. This episode is looking at the players of England. Here we go. Hello and welcome again to the International Soccer Preview by Soccer Files Canada. I'm Kevin and we continue Series 25 on the groups and players of the 2024 Euro Cup. This episode covers England's players and it's actually part 2 of the Players Mediacast. And here we look at the selections. In part 1, we made a list of the candidates and introduced them and their likelihood of making the squad. There is a link to that in the show notes. This episode will be divided into 2 sections. In section 1, we look over the list we compiled in part 1 to see who made it and who didn't. And in section 2 here, we summarize surprises in the selections and review injuries. Let's begin then, and we'll actually begin by looking at the preliminary squad they released. So England released a 33-man preliminary squad, and so they had to cut that down to 26 players. So that means 7 players were cut. So if you're following the YouTube feed here, we will highlight the players who made it in green and the players who did not make it or made just a preliminary squad in blue. All right, let's move on to section 1, and we have manager Gareth Southgate, who we will consider to have made the final cut. And let's go on to goalkeepers then. And we have a new candidate to add to the list, and it is a player who made the final cut. It's Dean Henderson, probably brought in to replace Sam Johnson, who was out with an elbow injury and but had not played for the squad. Last appeared on the bench for England in September 2023, so not that long ago, but brought back in, hadn't looked like a candidate. So Dean Henderson, a new player added to the squad and selected for the final squad. And going back to the list we made in part 1, we had definite candidates: Jordan Pickford, who made the cut, and of course, and Aaron Ramsdale also making it. The player I spoke about, Sam Johnson, was a likely candidate, but that was kind of not considering his injury. So the injury, I think we said in part 1 that he was not expected back until July 14th, so they knew that he wouldn't be able to make it. We had thought that if he didn't make it, that the backup might be James Trafford. He was a possible candidate for us there, but he only made the preliminary squad. He was one of the 7 players cut. All right, moving on to defense and central defenders. We also have a new candidate, that is Jarell Quansah. So we'll add him to the list. However, he was selected for the preliminary squad, but not the final squad. So Jarell Quansah not selected. And let's move on to the selections that we did have on the list. We didn't have any definite candidates here, actually, but we did have John Stones as a likely candidate, and he made it. We had 7, get that, 7 possible candidates, and so we have a lot to go through. The first was Harry Maguire, who made it to the preliminary squad, but didn't make the final cut there. Mark Guehi, second of 7 possible candidates, was selected. The third one, Fikayo Tomori, was not selected, even for the preliminary squad. Ezri Konsa, selected for the final squad. Jared Branthwaite, selected for the preliminary squad, but cut, so didn't make the final squad. Joe Gomez was selected, and so was the 7th candidate, Lewis Dunk. So, whoo, that's a lot of players to go through, and 5 of them making the final squad. So 3 of our cuts are here, central defenders, 3 of the 7 cuts that we're going to see. Over in the left back position, we really had a problem. Just a possible candidate in Ben Chilwell, who didn't make it, and Luke Shaw, who we basically had as seemingly off the squad. A lot of the season he was injured, and we thought that would be the case here. However, he was selected for the final squad, even though he is still tagged as being injured. So we're thinking that maybe an out of position player will be playing, but obviously they have hopes of him playing if he was selected. So it'll be interesting to see in game 1 how that pans out. And I can say that in the warm-up games, it was Kieran Trippier starting in that position both times. So usually a right back, but Kieran Trippier we've quite often seen on the left, actually. Okay, over to the right backs, and we have a definite candidate in Kyle Walker, who was selected. Here is where Kieran Trippier is listed, and he was selected too. Trippier was only a possible candidate, to my surprise there, but it looks like he has a big role to play, probably a starter, at least at the beginning. We have Rico Lewis also as a possible candidate. He was not selected, and Reece Lewis was, Reece James, seemingly off the squad, was not selected. Yes, okay. Let's go on to the midfield and defensive midfielders. Declan Rice, becoming ever more important for the team, was selected. However, our possible candidate, Calvin Phillips, did not make the squad there. So we go to central midfield, and we have 2 new candidates here. We have Curtis Jones, who made the preliminary squad but not the final squad, and then Adam Wharton, a Crystal Palace player, making the final squad. So a bit of a surprise there. Crystal Palace really getting good representation here because Dean Henderson is also on their roster. So those are 2 players that we hadn't had on the list in part 1. The players we had were likely candidate Conor Gallagher, and he was selected, and possible candidate Kobe Mainu, also selected. So 3 central midfielders, along with Declan Rice, make up the central midfield. Over to players coded as left midfielders. We just had 1 candidate here, and it was at the likely level. It was Jude Bellingham, who was selected for the final squad. Right midfielders, we had Jordan Henderson, who was a likely candidate. That was a bit of a surprise to me. But his participation forced us to put him as a likely candidate. He had started 6 of their 12 games over the period we looked at, but he was not selected for the final squad. So a bit of a surprise, but I think those intimate with the English team know that he kind of dropped off towards the end of the period. We have Trent Alexander-Arnold here. Many will think of him as a right defender, but because of Kyle Walker, he plays more midfield, at least in recent times, for England, and he is selected for the final squad. Moving on upfield, we have attacking midfielders and the left attacking midfielders. And again, a bit like Jordan Henderson, Marcus Rashford, we had as a likely character based on his participation over the period, but he was not selected even for the preliminary squad. Again, a player who dropped off kind of in recent times. And not that much of a surprise if you're intimate with kind of the Premier League there. We do have three possible candidates. James Maddison, he was selected for the preliminary squad but did not make the final cut. And the same is true of Jack Grealish. So on the surface, a lot of surprises here. Those two were just possible candidates. But again, kind of well-known names who I think a lot of people would have expected to make the final squad. The one who did was our third possible candidate, Anthony Gordon. So their club form really coming into play here, and again from the outside, a bit of a surprise to see Raheem Sterling, who's been with the squad for so long, just not even a consideration here, having last appeared in the World Cup. So he was not selected. On the right wing, Phil Foden was the Premier League Player of the Season, a definite candidate for us, and he was selected. On this side too, we also had Bukayo Saka. He was a likely candidate and was selected for the squad. And so was our possible candidate on this side. So Jared Bowen, a possible candidate, making the squad. So we had a lot of the left attackers not make the squad and right attackers making the squad. When we go to the warm-up games, the player in these positions was Eze, who we're going to meet soon, and Anthony Gordon. Those are the two starters in the warm-up games. All right, we go on to the central attacking midfielders. And here we have Cole Palmer as a possible candidate. He did make the squad. And we had Eberechi Eze as a possible but unlikely candidate. But he was in good form after the March game, so didn't play a lot for England over the period. But I think his form at the end got him onto the squad. He is selected for the squad. And again, Mason Mount, those who kind of see England from the outside may be surprised that he was not really a consideration, and he was not. But those on the inside know that he didn't play much at all during the season, so it's really not that much of a surprise. Okay, on to forwards. And we have Captain Harry Kane. We actually had him tagged with an injury. He was out with a back problem, which somewhere else I had read as an ankle injury since mid-May. And at the time we did part one, it was an unknown return date, but be shocking to see England without Harry Kane. And honestly, not much was made of that injury, so there wasn't a lot of angst about it. So perhaps some of these tags on him were more precautionary there. Anyway, Harry Kane selected for the squad. We had likely candidate Ollie Watkins, who was protected. He started the first of their warm-up games. Ivan Toney, a possible candidate, was selected, but Callum Wilson, the other possible candidate, was not selected. We also had Eddie Nketiah as possible but unlikely, and he was not selected for the squad. So there we have it, 26 players for England, and we'll just kind of go over and summarize some of the key points there. So some notable non-selections. Jordan Henderson, a veteran with the team, was not selected for the team. So he had been in tournaments all the way from the 2012 Euro Cup, always selected, and not selected for this one. Marcus Rashford too, a veteran, not selected for the team. He'd been on the team in every tournament since Euro 2016. And then Raheem Sterling, although those in the know knew that he had drifted off the team. Still a surprise, especially from an overhead view, to see this player selected consistently since 2014 World Cup, not being selected for this squad. Some surprise inclusions are Dean Henderson, um, brought back in. So he actually should have been on our list because he did appear in September 2023. So not that much of a surprise, but we didn't introduce him in part one. So we'll introduce him here. He's 23 years old and has been with England since 2020, just one cap in that time. And he's currently with Crystal Palace in England. Since 2023, and Manchester United for a long time before that, 2015 to 2023. He was selected for Euro 2020. He was on. He was actually on the bench for game one, but withdrew from the squad due to injury in that tournament, and then not selected for the World Cup in 2022. But here he is back, as we said, likely because of the injury of Sam Johnson. Surprise inclusions too is Luke Shaw. I think even fans very familiar with English soccer would think he would have been out with an injury. He was out with a muscle injury since late February and had an unknown return date. And a bit injury prone, especially over the recent years, Luke Shaw. And a surprise to see him in, and I wonder really if he is fit to play. As we saw, he didn't appear in either of the warm-up games. Another surprise selection is Eberechi Eze. We had him as possible but unlikely, but his good recent form rightfully earned him a place on the team. Others will be more surprised with Adam Wharton, because he didn't make a strong impression in the season. He did quite well towards the end. Anyway, we'll introduce him because he wasn't on our list. So he is 20 years old, and he has just one cap in 2024. That was in the warm-up games there. He subbed into the first of the two warm-up games and was on the bench for the other. And he is, like Dean Henderson, with Crystal Palace in England since 2024. He had been with Blackburn in England prior to that. The other players we won't detail because they only made the preliminary squad, but Jarrell Quansah and Curtis Jones, also new players added to the squad, kind of came in right at the end there. Okay, updates on injury. Well, recovered from injury is Harry Kane. As we said, it wasn't huge news, but he was out with a back problem, elsewhere described as an ankle injury, since mid-May, and there had been an unknown return date, but there wasn't a huge outcry about this. So, as we said, probably more precautionary. And on we go. Luke Shaw, well, I'm reluctant to say he's recovered from injury. Even as of June 15th, he's listed as injured without a return date. So I think he's coming into the tournament injured. The warm-up games kind of providing muscle to that argument. I wasn't trying to make a pun there. I just see the word in front of me and used that expression. Anyway, Luke Shaw, still, I would say, an injury doubt, but was selected for the squad. Dropped due to injury, we saw Sam Johnson, which is probably what opened the door for Dean Henderson. In his case, it was an elbow injury since late March, and he had not been expected back until July 14th. So we're quite sure that was the reason he was left out. And then injured, but were not strong candidates, Tyrone Mings. Maybe if he hadn't been injured, a cruciate ligament tear since August of 2023, which caused him to miss all the fall games and the March 2024 games. That's why his participation was so low. So the injury playing a big role in his in his possible but unlikely status. He actually was due to come back on June 12th, but even if he was recovered, probably his lack of fitness, his lack of playing this year, precluded him from joining the squad. All right, that is it for England. They're 26 players, so we hope this look at them helps you to enjoy watching them in the cup. We would like to thank Mike Kripak, Big Sound Music, and Pixabay for the wonderful background music called Dance 90s accompanying this mediacast.